Okay, so I want to show you an alternative way to process RSS and in fact any XML from the web, because the feed parser method is really specific to RSS feeds, but I want you to be able to read any kind of XML or in fact any kind of structured data from the web. But to understand how this works, we need to look a little bit deeper at XML. I have an RSS feed pulled up here, but it shows the structure of XML, which is that it has a tree structure. So essentially you have the root, which is this RSS tag, and then nested inside that we have a channel. Nested inside that we have a bunch of items that I'm able to collapse here. And so we start at the top level, RSS, inside that is a channel, inside that are the items, inside the items are the titles, the links, the descriptions, and so on. And so that's going to be useful to us as we think about how to process any kind of XML, because it's all set up like a tree. It has one tag that's the root, and then has a bunch of nested things within that. So there's processors that allow you to work with those. We're going to flip back over. What I have here is basically some of the code that we already had done. We've imported requests, and I'm using request.get to get the last RSS feed that we looked at from This American Life. I'm saving that in a variable called podcast, but I've also added this line to import xml.etree.elementtree. So this is built in, you don't need to install this, it's part of Python, and it essentially can process that XML tree from the root tag and then find all of the subtags within that. So once we've done this request to get our file, the next thing we want to do is process that into a tree structure. The way that we're going to do this is going to give us the root of the tree, and then we're going to be able to navigate down from there. So we're going to say root is, and I'm just going to copy and paste this. We're going to use this module, and in there we're going to use the function from string, which means process this XML structure into a tree structure from the string of XML that we're going to get from our podcast variable .content. So .content is similar to .text. It's just going to get you the text. You could in fact use .text there. And so now this whole thing is going to take the text that we get from here, read it as XML, and process it into a tree structure that we can access from the root. So let's just print root right now to see what we get. So I've called this file RSS2. And so it says, okay, well, we've got this RSS element, which makes sense. That's the root of our RSS tree in this XML document. So it says, all right, the thing at the root is the RSS. Now, there's a bunch of ways to navigate down. If we look at the code here, we have RSS, and then inside that we have a channel. Inside that we have our items, which are what we care about. So you could kind of navigate in that way. We're going to use a nice feature that comes along with this package, though. So one thing you can do is iterate through a root. And in fact, iterate through any part of this tree. And that's the command iter for iterate. And then you can say, I want to find subparts that have this tag in them, in this case, item. So this is going to loop through the tree at root, and anytime it finds item, it's going to return that. So we're going to put this into a loop. We're going to say for item in root.iter iterate for items. We're going to look for items underneath the root. Once we find one, we're going to call that the item. And for now, we'll just print item. And again, that's going to print an object, but we're just going to take this incrementally. So if we run this code, now we can see we got a bunch of item elements. And whenever you see stuff with this weird code, that means we essentially have an object there. So let's just do item.text. Now if we run that, all right, we just get a bunch of nothing. So we need to process that item a little bit more. If we flip back here, that makes sense because items are not just one thing. They have a whole bunch of elements. And so let's actually go through the elements of our item. Okay, so for now, let's do another loop. So let's say for attribute in item. We're not going to do iter here. We're just going to go through the item and look at all of the attributes. We'll do print attribute. Okay, if we run that, now we're getting a whole bunch of stuff here because we have objects, but what we can see is that we have the elements. We have duration, subtitle, summary, creator, content, and then again, duration, subtitle, summary, creator, content. So we're getting essentially those name value pairs for each of these elements. Okay, so if we come back to our code, I'm going to show you a couple things that we get from this element tree package. We know that we're seeing the tag names and then there's also text. So we're going to print attribute.tag and then attribute.text. So this will show us the tag, the thing in the square brackets, and then the text that comes between those brackets. So if we run this, this is a little bit of a mess because we've got, this is actually the tag here, but it's kind of filling out the namespace that it came from. So let's actually clear this up. We'll do print tag, colon, and then I'll indent this for the text, so that'll be a little easier to read. Okay, so we have title, here's the title. We've got the link, here's the link, the description, all of these different attributes. So we did hit an error here because I think it had a hard time processing what I had down here. So this can't concatenate string, not none type to strings. There's some weird parsing error, but essentially we're seeing what we want here. We're able to get the tags and then the actual text that comes from them. I think this one gave an error because enclosure is probably a slightly more complicated item. And so that kind of leads us to what we want to do next. We don't just want to print tags and text because some tags have subtags and they don't just have text. And that'll give you an error like this. So we want to know, well, what are the things that we want to print? So in this case, let's just print the titles again because we know that titles are interesting and that's something that we had done before. So we'll do for attribute in item and then we'll use that .iter again and look for title. So just go through the tags that called title and then print attribute.text, and we'll comment out this line here. So just for the titles, go ahead and print the text that goes with that. So we're going to get the titles of the episodes. If we run this, now we get the same thing that we saw when we were using the feed parser package, but we've done it with just a generic XML parsing package here. So we use requests to get the feed instead of allowing feed parser to get it. And then we use this xml.etree.elementtree to parse that XML. You can pass in any variable here that has XML, including a variable that you may have read from a local file. And then we saw how to use loops, essentially, especially with this iteration function, to go through and print out different elements. So I don't know that this is better than using the feed parser. Feed parser is really nice, but this is much more generic. So you don't have to just use this on RSS, on podcasts. You can use this on any XML file that you can get anywhere and just customize what you have here in the loops based on what information you're interested in extracting.